Hey again, everyone, and welcome to the Experience Maker. My name is Dan Gingiss, customer experience speaker, author, podcaster, and coach. And every week I bring somebody to the show who helps us learn something new about customer experience because they have either become the experience maker at their business or they teach others to do the same. And today I am very excited to welcome Diane Majors to the show. Diane is the founder and chief experience officer of Experience Catalysts. Diane, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm super excited to have a conversation, Dan. We always have so much fun when we talk, and I'm happy to share with everyone else. Welcome, everybody.
Well, thank you all for joining, and we're happy to take your questions. Be happy to ask them to Diane later on in the show, or if you have a question for me, I'm happy to answer as well. So, Diane, would you start, please, by just introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. Diane Major, CCXP. I've been in this space a long time. I actually started as a clinical psychologist, so I've always been interested in human behavior. And I fell into this totally by accident. I had a boss, a CEO, who was just a believer in everything we did for the customer. So he said, "You're going to be the one to go out and figure out what they're looking for and how we're going to deliver it." So that started a division of Cisco Foods. And then I went up to the Cisco corporate office and was part of their business transformation team, which meant I kind of owned everything that touched the customer from UX to support. And so I spent a lot of time there, was an accidental consultant for a few years, and then worked 3 years at the office of the customer for AT&T in their business solution space. Most recently, until May of last year, I was interim CEO for the CXPA. And now, in between all those gigs, I've been consulting and coaching and advising organizations and their leaders on how to adopt experience management as a discipline.
That is awesome. And I love how you have both experience in the trenches and then have become more of a consultant. That's very similar to my background as well. And I do think it gives us a little bit of an advantage because we've actually done this before. And nothing against other consultants, but sometimes consultants get a bad rap as people that just sort of tell you what to do and then leave and let you figure it out. And you and I, because
Yeah.
we've been in the trenches, we know what it takes and we know all of the elements of trying to get stuff done at a big company. Can you talk a little bit about that and sort of that line between the consulting and coaching of here's what you have to do to the actual getting down to executing?
Oh gosh, what I think is really important when you're coaching or advising and you've been in this space before is you kind of can tell them what not to do. And here's the obstacles you're going to face. And what I love about that is that you can arm them with the right sequence of things, the right conversations to have, the right language to use, talking to different stakeholders. And I think that really helps them to be able to adapt and adopt and make impact quicker. So that I think is one of the major benefits of that. But it's also about arming them with the right knowledge and information they need. So I don't know how many practitioners out there who are just getting started or still new, but this is a really overwhelming profession. It's gorgeous, beautiful, and wonderful, hard work. And I think that component of it is being that support to the organization about this is a lot of change. It seems overwhelming, and making sure they feel like, hey, we can do this, and they start to recognize those little things that mean the organization is shifting. So I'm there to kind of remind them and go, that was pretty significant. You got your executive to sponsor a project, and he was talking about experience, or hey, you finally have a prioritization model on how you're going to prioritize products. That is one of the things that I think we're so it's not just the hard knocks and where you're going, but you got to recognize what progress you're making, because otherwise you'll blink and keep working and miss it.
Absolutely, for sure. And obviously, everything has changed in the last few months. Customer experience has really come to the forefront in so many companies. We're getting projects done so much faster than originally planned. Can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of how have companies sort of woken up the last few months, and even the ones that maybe weren't entirely convinced that this stuff was important have really signed on and are working on this now.
They really are. And it came in kind of a funny way, though, too, because if you think about it over the last few years, employee experience has been, buying bagels and putting in these great work environments, which are all wonderful things. But I don't think they realize that how they care for the experience of their employees as a customer of the brand, just like they do their other customers, was so important. And that listening to them and having the right tools and empowerment, especially if they're going to be out on their own, was even more critical. So that helped also to say that's important, but also then we've got to listen closer to our customers because our business models have to change. The way we make decisions, yes, has been accelerated, but it has to change too. And how are we going to understand the needs of human beings as we go through this? Because everybody knows on this call that everybody's really being more introspective and has a different perspective of their life and what they're going to do post all this going on. And so how will brands really understand that? And what happens to the competition, that the small businesses that are going away? How do we help them come back? Or how do we look at merging talent together from those small businesses? So there's so many things to consider when you go through this. And I think that's where they're starting to understand if we don't have a way to really understand and move and action on that quickly, that they're going to lose out.
Yeah, let's talk about small businesses for a minute, because I think this is really kind of fascinating. And let's rewind back to pre-COVID for a moment. So I find that one of the challenges of being in the CX space is everybody, including me, looks at Amazon as a great customer experience. And it's one of the reasons why it's so successful. And yet, some people look at Amazon and there's more of a negative feeling because they feel like that it is hurting small businesses. Now, my own opinion is that small businesses generally have hurt themselves, and that really we have more to learn from Amazon than anything. But I'm interested to see if you have some thoughts on how does a small business react to a behemoth like Amazon? Obviously, they're never going to have the resources or the cloud, but how do you, I guess, in some ways, zig when Amazon zags and still have a really successful business?
Well, we have to remember, I was telling somebody about the movie WALL-E. Have you ever seen the movie WALL-E, where
Sure.
it's the humans have left the earth and everything's kind of done for them, and there's one big box. And I think about that from a perspective, what that movie really came back to was, in the end, was all about the human connection. And I think small businesses, if I think about a couple of restaurants that are just in our neighborhood that have already gone out of business, the reason we frequented them rather than the big chains was because they knew us. And it was kind of like the norm. When we walked in, it would be like they knew we were coming and say, "Can I get you your Chardonnay or whatever?" And that I don't think you can replace. So I think what they're missing is, while it's really hard work to build a small business, you really have that opportunity to connect on a level that is going to make a huge difference. I don't really see that with Amazon. I have never talked to an Amazon person. It's great to go on and shop, but it's not going to afford me that connection. And we're finding in the research now that especially through COVID, even beforehand, we were shifting away from, I don't want everything digital. I'm really missing that connection with humans. I want more. As technology frees us up to do the mundane things and the functional things we need to do, how am I going to spend my time and who am I going to spend it with? So I think that's what they have to capitalize on. If I'm going to go back to my psychology degree, that's where I think we're really going to miss some of the opportunity as a small business.
Well, I was actually a psychology major as well, so totally agree with that. And I've told this story before. Some people may have heard, but there's a toy and game store in downtown Chicago, and it's a mom and pop. It's a one location, and my family plays a lot of board games. We love strategy games, and we have a lot of fun with it. And I walked into this store, and there were two things that I noticed that I thought were remarkable. The first is that the woman behind the counter was basically Amazon's recommendation engine in human form. So she's like, "Oh, you like Settlers of Catan? Well, you'll love this game and you'll love this game. And have you heard of this game?" And I thought that was awesome because it was really fun to have a conversation and not necessarily feel like I was being sold to, but I was having a discussion about, well, what is it about this game that you think I would like about it, and that sort of thing. The second thing that they did that I thought was just awesome was in the back of the store, they have a library set up where you can check out any of the board games and actually sit down at the table and play them before you decide to buy them. And they even go so far as to have, like, I think Tuesday nights were like singles game night, and they invited people in the
Cool.
area to come and play board games. These
That's
are all
cool.
things that Amazon cannot do. And so, what I would posit is that even if their games are a little bit more expensive than Amazon, I think people are willing to pay for that to have the experience versus this just expectation of, well, I have the same products on my shelf as Amazon. It's no fair that Amazon charges less, and so woe is me. I thought this business did an awesome job of really standing out through experience and in a way that is anti-digital. Exactly what you were saying. It was not something that Amazon could do, and I think it's important that businesses take a look at their take a look inward. Number one, look at what Amazon does really well and figure out how you can replicate it in your business. Number two, think of ways that you can do something really well that Amazon can't do because they're not in your local community. And I believe the two can coexist. So I think it's a great point about this digital. The real question is going to be post COVID: are people going to like having moved to digital, or are we going to go back again?
I think it's going to be a personal choice. I mean, there are definitely some things that I hadn't taken advantage of before that I will probably continue to do. Like, I never went and picked up my groceries. I like going in and shopping, and I like to, see what's new in the store, and I like to pick out my own produce. So that might not change, but there are definitely things that I've learned that will work better for me. So everybody's going to have to go through that. The question is, how will organizations understand that? How are consumers making decisions differently, and what decisions they'll make should drive their business? So if they're on the rail going down a path and they're not aware of those decisions getting made, or even disruptors coming, because I think that's going to be the next thing we'll have to face, they're going to be woefully surprised.
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned grocery stores. I also like going grocery shopping, but I tell you, there is something to this curbside pickup where you save an hour and a half out of your day and just go get the groceries and go home. And yeah, it might not be the exact pair you would have chosen, but man, that hour and a half is worth something. So I do think some of that stuff will stay because people will get used to it.
I
Um,
agree.
so tell me about what you're working on right now. Obviously, all of us that are in the CX space, whether we're speakers, consultants, coaches, whatever, we've all had to pivot as well in our businesses. So tell me what you've been working on, and then what are you just general themes that you're seeing from your clients as we're now in month 6 of the pandemic.
As it relates to the pandemic, or just in general? Just in
In
general.
I think in general, from a business perspective.
We've probably had, most of my clients are really focused on optimizing that digital experience where they already had it. So they aren't really going to new channels. For most of them, they had something, but it was trying to understand, like, the redesign of a customer care, self-care support. They realized that having people at home allowed them to have more people doing proactive calling because they were more productive at home. Big surprise. And so the ability for the customers to continue to self-serve now would give them even more time to be proactive and drive revenue. So those things, that the opportunities they're discovering, are part of what I'm working on with clients. There's a lot right now of upskilling. That's another area where I think people hadn't really realized that they have a lot of talent in their organization, but they need additional talent, like design thinking. And some of the time that's been freed up for them working from home and having that time is to say, well, how do we upskill our organization? So a lot of my time has been spent on, teaching design thinking, or how to build a business case around customer experience for the teams, but also for the organizations. So one organization, we started inspiration sessions where it was just, what are other companies doing in this space and how are they thinking about it? So they're also, one good positive is they're starting to look outside their organization. About this, hey, I can't just put my nose to the grindstone. I've got to now pay attention to my customers and this bigger ecosystem that's happening, because I'm not going to be able to do it on my own, and my competitors are going to be reacting in different ways. So I got to keep ahead on that. So that's the other piece of really being the eyes and ears out what's happening in the space and listening to other organizations and bringing that competitive awareness to bear. Some things to think about, if you will, what the next step holds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I always recommend absolutely look outside your own organization. Also, look outside your own industry because oftentimes companies in completely different industries are doing really cool things that you can emulate in your business. Might not be the exact same thing, of course, but there's a lot of places to find inspiration. It's one of the reasons I love teaching about CX by storytelling because there's so many great stories across industries, B2C, B2B, that we can tell. And if it causes someone to say, wait a second, we could do something similar over here in our part of the business, then I feel like I've been doing my job right.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's a great point. I wanted to ask you, Diane. You've also been very active over the years in the CXPA. Would you tell us a little bit about that and that organization?
Absolutely. So the CXPA was founded in 2011. Gene Bliss and Bruce Temkin, probably people will know those names, started it as a nonprofit association because there are a lot of us out there doing the work and we really didn't have a community to support us. So some of us were just connecting on our own. Like I remember the first conversation I had with Jeff Mango. He was at Verizon at that time and had been charged with customer experience, and he was new to it. And the conversations of just being connected to someone like, I'm not crazy and I'm not alone, was awesome. And being able to learn and bounce ideas off of each other. Well, that's really what the CXPA was created for. It's by members for members, and it's all about that connection and really finding people who have answers to your questions, but also sharing your own knowledge and building things with other people that are better because we're together is always the takeaway that I have. So that association also has a CCXP, which is a certified CX professional. And that is an agnostic, competency learning-based certification that people can get that demonstrates that they have the competency in all of the disciplines that are necessary for CX. So lots of great things to be had, but it's just wonderful to be a part of a community where they're talking the same language and they're struggling with the same things that you are. So a place where you can go to really learn and grow your own network.
A place where everybody knows your name, it sounds like.
Exactly right.
What are, just out of curiosity, what are the disciplines that the CXPA lists as being critical to CX?
Oh, so this is a test. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Well, one is the ability to actually define a strategy. So surprisingly, when I go to organizations and I say, "Where's your strategy?" and they look at me and go, "Well, we're doing these things," I'm like, "That's not a strategy." So one is defining a strategy for, by the way, the largest asset of your business or your brand. The second is really alignment and accountability. So how do you get the organization out of their silos and aligned, and how do you help them make decisions as an organization across the customer's journey? And then how do you hold people accountable for this? If you're trying to change the way people think and work, well, how do you make sure they're doing that and that they're seeing the benefits of it? The next one is getting just what I call customer intelligence or even experience intelligence. It's all about understanding from surveys or social media or data or analytics, what's going on? What are customers thinking and feeling about your brand? And what are they doing with your brand? And what do you want them to do differently? So there's always that piece. Then there's kind of the insights to action, I would call it, this kind of understanding and then designing and innovating around the experience. Great to have all this information coming in, but you can't just push it out to the organization. Finding the right problems to solve, intentionally designing those opportunities, and then launching that through innovation is the next competency. Then it's the measures, metrics, and business value around that. So great, you're going to go change something. Well, did it have an impact? And how are you going to know it had an impact? And this last one is all about a small thing called culture. So I would say that's probably the biggest bent is getting people to think and behave differently, as I said, but really creating a place where people want to work, people are valued where they work, they're contributing to something, this sense of purpose. All those things we know are important, are part of when you look at brands who do this well, have just created that culture of we're all about the experience for each other and for the people who are our customers of our brand.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and there's so much that I want to say to all of those pieces, but I think I'll hit on the last one, which is the culture piece. And I once got what I thought was a great compliment from a boss that said to me, Dan, I noticed that in every meeting you're in, you're wearing the customer's hat. You're representing the customer. And when I went to visit the worldwide headquarters at Comcast in Philadelphia, I was excited to see that in every conference room and in every executive's office, they actually have a chair, an empty chair, that says the word customer on it. And that is to get everybody thinking from the customer's perspective during a meeting. So if we're talking about how we need to make more revenue and some finance guy comes in and says, well, we could charge them an extra fee for this, then the idea that the customer's sitting there watching you saying, I don't think so, helps you to make better decisions, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't figure out ways to make more revenue. Every business needs to make more revenue. It's just that, and I think interestingly, if we kind of bring this conversation full circle, we're starting to see a lot of the major airlines in the US now just recently stopped with the biggest nuisance fee of all, which is the change fee, the $200 to change your flight, right? Which has been an absurd fee, but was introduced, I think, post 9/11 after airlines were really struggling and needed to come up with a way to make more money. And so the answer was nuisance fees. And I guarantee you that if they had a customer chair in their office, that is not how they would have answered the question. And I think this pandemic has caused them to realize that. So to me, that's a huge part of the culture, is teaching people to just stop for a moment,
Yeah,
think
I
about
mean,
it from a customer perspective. Go ahead.
exactly. I think what most people don't think about with this particular profession is 95% of the job is change management. And one of the things I wish I would have done a lot earlier in my career was learn about different models of change management and how to write a good plan around change management and stakeholder engagement, because that's really what it comes down to. When people say, well, how am I going to get an organization that's been around 150 years, that's global? It's not an easy feat. So really having the structure around that, I would consider that the other competency that's needed, because that's really a lot of the job. And it's all what I call DEFCON 3, right? It's all big change. There's very few small things you do that don't have big impact somewhere else, or we have to align all these things to get that one thing done. That's where it really comes into play. So that's my advice to everybody today. If you're getting started, that's one of the skill sets that's highly, highly. And to that point, I also, people often say to me, well, how are we going to change the organization? And the question I always ask is, well, what do you want people to be thinking and doing differently? I mean, you kind of have to define what it is you want the organization to do. And that's true for almost anything. But in this case, it really is. You've got to really define what that future experience and future culture should look like, so people have an idea what they're supposed to be skating toward.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think that if there's one positive out of this pandemic, it's that change management and business continuity planning have become really, really more acute. And I think companies have
Yeah.
realized that they've got to be doing this, otherwise they're not going to survive. So I love it. Diane, thank you so much. I like to say this is the fastest half an hour on the internet. And
Wow,
I
that was.
loved chatting with you and learning from you. How can people stay in contact with you if they'd like to reach you?
Hey, the old adage, I'm on LinkedIn. Just pay attention to how you spell the last name, Magers. I'm there, or you can just ping me at diamagers@att.net. Or I don't have a website. I've not ever had a website, so you can just reach me on LinkedIn, or look me up on the CXPA directory. I'm there too.
Fantastic. That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Diane. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. Next week on The Experience Maker, we're going to have Luke Williams. Luke is the Senior Vice President at Qualtrics. So we're going to be diving into the numbers and the analytics next week of customer experience. Don't miss it. Luke's a great guy and a real smart dude, and I learn something from him every time I hang with him. So excited to see Luke next week. Thank you again so much for joining me on The Experience Maker. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch us either live or recorded. If you have a recommendation for a guest that you'd like to see on this show, do me a favor and send me a note on LinkedIn or Twitter. On Twitter, I'm at D Gingiss. and LinkedIn, of course, Dan Gingiss. But send me a recommendation. I'll be happy to reach out to them. Always looking for terrific guests like our guest today, Diane, to be on the show. Thank you, and we'll see you next week and every week at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursdays on the Experience Maker. I'm Dan Gingiss, customer experience speaker and coach. Have a great weekend.